Hello, welcome to another episode of Off the Menu. I'm your host, Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with Terradiddleous Charles Coulombe.
Terradiddleous.
Mm-hmm.
Is this some sort of manufactured adjective for the noun taradiddle?
That's right.
Pretentious nonsense?
Look, that was submitted from a patron, and I think he sent it in affectionately.
Affectionately? Am I a purveyor of pretentious nonsense?
Apparently to some.
Well, firstly, let me tell you this. If it is nonsense, it's not pretentious. And if it's pretentious, it's not nonsense. Gotcha there, smart guy.
I don't think that's true at all. I don't think that works, actually.
It does for me. All my nonsense is of the people. Humble. The simple people of the earth.
The
and
French,
all of my pretentiousness.
Yeah, the French are so humble. Yeah, they totally don't have their noses in the air.
No, of course not. And that's not all. That's not all. Not only is my nonsense not pretentious, but my pretentiousness is not nonsense.
You know, this is a trap, and I'm very smart, so I'm going to avoid this trap.
What trap?
And so, a trap into your crazy vortex, where we play by your rules, your Joker jack-o'-lantern rules, and it's like, I don't know, we're just in your sadistic game.
Come a little closer, just a little bit closer. You're looking so frightened. Come a little bit closer. You ready?
Yeah.
Hangamba!
What is that all about?
What's what about?
What language is that?
What language? What are you talking about? You seem very confused this evening. Are you all right? Have you been taking your liver pills? Ah, see? You haven't been taking your liver pills. I can always tell.
I'm confused because you're so busy protecting the truth this episode.
Protecting the truth?
Yeah.
The truth needs no protection. It stands on its own.
Wow, that's deep.
It sounded deep. I'm not quite sure what it means.
Wow. Let me meditate on that one.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna think about it. I have no idea what it's supposed to mean, but it did sound good.
It sounded really good. It sounded like it had some force to it.
I really meant something.
But I don't know if it meant anything, to be honest. But
well, you know, as I say, your brother, God bless him, he years ago, I've told the story before, but I always think of it. I said something like that at a party, and someone goes, "What the hell does that mean?" And your brother says, "Doesn't mean anything. Doesn't have to. It's deep." Well, that's true. But no, it's amazing because the people who are going to be hearing this are hearing it on a very special day.
What day is that? So it's going to be March 1st.
It is. And that is St. David's Day, the patron of Wales.
Oh.
I don't mean the cetaceans out in the ocean. I mean the little country west of England, east of Ireland, south of Scotland, Wales. Yes, indeedy. Land of Lowell Thomas and Arthur Machen and lots of other people with strange names. And a very interesting country. The last stand of the ancient Britain. King Arthur's favored people alongside the Cornish and the Bretons and the Cumbrians. And it's not all. It's not all. the Welsh gave us very important songs. All
I'm
Through
sure.
the Night,
Yeah,
mhm.
yeah.
Deck the Halls with Boughs of Holly. Deck the Halls with Boughs of Holly. Fa la 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 la. That's Welsh.
Whenever I think the Welsh now, I have to think of that epic meme of production that was sent a couple months ago, where that tradition where you basically have to rap battle a skeleton horse, otherwise the skeleton horse has a right to drink all your alcohol.
Yes. And believe me, there are a lot of thirsty skeleton horses running around Wales. It's more dangerous than you think. But the symbol of Wales is the red dragon, and they have two plants that they consider their badges. The one is the leek, which is sort of a giant green onion,
Hmm.
and the other is the daffodil. And the
Okay.
reason for that is that in temperate climates, not Southern California, but in temperate climates where they actually have winter, they also have a season called spring. And when the snow starts to melt, you have these little white flowers that are called snowdrops. But after them come these yellow flowers called daffodils. And then, of course, follow the tulips and roses and so on in succession till you're in the middle of summer and got a profusion of flowers. Unless you live in Southern California, in which case everything's blooming all the time, so you don't really notice the flowers.
Yeah, your setup is tedious and complicated. Doesn't really interest me. All right.
Wow, way to show cultural sensitivity. But at any rate, the reason why the daffodil is so important to the Welsh is because, of course, they tend to sprout up around March the 1st, St. David's Day.
Hmm. Okay.
Now, there's more to it than that, though, because the Welsh eat well.
Good for them.
They do.
What do they eat?
And oh golly, lamb, steak, mutton. They eat well. I like Welsh food. And if it were not for the COVID monster, I would already have been to Wales this year.
Hmm.
And I want to send a shout out, by the way, to the Oratory at Cardiff. That's the Oratorian community that's forming in Cardiff, the capital of Wales.
Some fans over there?
No, sort of, kind of, I guess, but I'm in touch with them. I'm certainly their fans. I don't know if they're my fans, but I'm fans of theirs.
Hmm.
And for that matter, a shout out to the people at the Shrine of Holywell in North Wales. And although it's outside Wales, it's in Glastonbury. A shout out to the Benedictine community in Glastonbury and Dom Bede Rowe, their prior.
Hmm.
I'm getting my Celtic on.
That's for sure. What else is going on?
Well, a lot of stuff. March 17th will be St. Patrick's Day, and we'll do something for that. I don't know what. But you know what else happens on St. Patrick's Day?
What?
The Feast of St. Joseph of Arimathea, who founded Glastonbury. So you see, it is a Celtic month. There's other news.
What?
Well, there's a little bit of a question in our nation's capital.
What is that?
Well, as you know, there's been a great wall put around the Capitol to keep the riffraff in or the hoi polloi out. But anyway, it's there, and there are National Guard troops. Well, it was revealed this week that nobody is quite sure who ordered the fence put up. Everyone's denying any knowledge of it. And there was a great deal of question as to who had ordered the National Guard to guard the Capitol building. And then it was revealed that they were still operating under President Trump's orders. Too bad they didn't impeach him, huh?
Wow.
What?
Okay.
So basically, Congress is functioning under the protection given them by the evil Orange Man.
And looks like they started that 4 to 8 year vacation. You know, nobody knows, you know, who brought, you know, all the security there. But you know, we don't need to dig too deep. We don't really need to worry. We just
Coast.
Kickback. Yeah, coast.
Yeah. And see, I understand that because the Congress functions very much like law enforcement in the old neighborhood. Only the characters aren't nearly so colorful. Wouldn't it be fun to have Nancy Pelosi come out and after some really crazy thing happened, to have her turn to the press gallery and say, "Nothing to see here. You can all go home now.
That
It's
would be
all right.
something.
Move along."
That would be something.
Wouldn't that be great?
Oh, I would love that.
Move along now. You've all got homes to go to. Go away now.
All right, let's leverage this into the memes of production.
Nationalize the memes of production.
For the common good.
Wait a minute. Wait. I heard common good was LARPing.
Well, that doesn't even make sense because common good is like progress or something. It's so abstract because it could be anything. So how could it be LARPing?
Says you. Integralists push for a government with the common good. Integralists, so I've been told, are LARPers. Therefore, seeking the common good is LARPing.
Okay, then I'm not in favor of the common good. I'm just in favor of the good for me. I don't care about anyone else. There, we happy now? What?
Well,
is that what this person wanted? I don't get it.
I hope not. I don't know. I only read the news. I don't make it.
What's the alternative? I don't understand. I mean, the common good is not an integralist specific concept that is, I should hope more people than integralists are striving for the common good. No?
Well, the problem is the definition of the common good.
Of course.
So, for instance, with the integralists, they would say that assisting the population in their salvation is also part of the common good.
Yeah. But not the usage of the term common good in general. I mean...
Yeah, but it's suspicious, especially when used by Catholics, LARPers.
I could see that. I mean, it's like when people talk about how the church is the enemy of progress and use that term progress. That's suspicious. It's suspicious,
yeah, it is, because it's like stupid stuff.
Yeah, like the destruction of family is progress, destroying a family.
Well, it is.
Yeah.
It is because the more kids who are screwed up because they've been passed from foster home to foster home or relative to relative, the better for society.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyhow.
All right, what do we got for our meme?
One meme today. Now, this is actually a comment. It's actually a reply to a comment. I'm going to bring it up on the screen. Actually, so let me preface. Okay, yeah. So here we go. Let me just. Whoa. All right. So someone named L asked the question: do Italian monarchists have a divide between more traditionally conservative Catholic and liberal sects, like Spain Carlists, France's Legitimists, and Britain's Jacobites? Now, the meme is the response here. Now, to me, when I read this, I pictured like, the original poster, going into like a bar or something, like on a popular street, and then there's like this dark alley on the side, and that this person who's replying is like, "Psst, hey, over here.
Hey kid.
And he's got, he's in the shadows and he's got this trench coat, and so imagine that, and this is what he says. Hey friend, this is a good question. I want it to get answered by Coulombe and Franchini eventually, so I'm going to give you a guide on how to properly send it in. You're going to want to go straight into the Tumblr House site's contact page. Send them a little message. Make sure to include something about free shipping and handling for purchases over $25, and how you can get a $5 discount for a review on a book you get. This is similar to Simony, which the Franchini clan truly appreciate.
That's true.
And then ask your question. Take note that, like our bishops, Franchini and Charles are more interested in money than answering our questions, so they may request a small payment. If you're urgent to get this answered, consider subscribing to their Patreon. Good luck, your friend, Edgy. Wow.
Oh, talk about a tipster. That boy knows what he be talking about.
Great advice, and I said as much. And I think he replied to me. He's like, "Yeah, I've been watching this channel for a good while, and I've picked up a thing or two."
Edgy. I gotta say, your Uncle Giovanni would have liked this kid.
Yeah.
You know, keep him around. You know, we'll find some work for him. You just keep him in the mix. He's okay. Keep him around.
Yeah. A tipster. We need
A
tipsters
tipster.
like that. Yeah.
We need more of them. Officer Clancy thrived off them. And we had a
Absolutely.
lot of them back in the day. I
Yes, we did.
remember it
Those were the
well.
days. Yes.
Hey, officer. Ah, well, what is it? What's on your mind then, Boyle? Go ahead. You can tell me. Officer, I don't know how to say this, but I think there's something going down in the bar next door. Ah, really? No. Well, would you tell me? Would it be Frankie? That is. Well, I didn't get a good look at him, but I think it was Giancarlo Manicari. Ah, thanks for telling me, Boyo. That's long arm of the law to the rescue. And then in he'd go, guns blazing, shoot up the place. And then, of course, afterwards, when the meat wagon would come from the morgue, he would explain that they were all resisting arrest.
Which is what they were doing.
They were.
So.
But of course, if it were Franchini's, he'd say, "Ah, well, boyo, don't you worry your little head about it. You go along now. Here's a 10 spot. Go have a drink somewhere else, will you?"
Different strokes for different folks.
It's true.
All right. We'll ask the question. I'm going to ask Charles the question that the original person submitted. How do you feel about that, Charles? Are you cool with that?
I'm game. I'm
right.
game for it, especially because it's an Italian topic. You know how I feel about Italian topics.
Yeah. All right. So, do Italian monarchists have a divide between more traditionally conservative Catholic and liberal sects, like the Spain's Carlists, France's Legitimists, and Britain's Jacobites?
They do indeed, but it's a little more complex than you might think. Firstly, Italy, as with Germany, Italy opened the 19th century made up of several different monarchies. There were the Papal States in the center of the country, the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, which were Naples and Sicily in the south, the Grand Duchy of Tuscany, which was Florence in that area, the Duchies of Parma under a Bourbon branch, and the Duchy of Modena under a Habsburg branch, Austria Este, the Lombardo-Venetian Kingdom, which was Lombardy, Milan, and that area, and Venice, directly under the Emperor of Austria, who was the king of the Lombardo-Venetian Kingdom, and then the Kingdom of Sardinia, which was the island that gave it its name, as well as Genoa, Piedmont, and Savoy, which is now part of France. Now, these were all Catholic kingdoms, except for the Papal States, which were Catholic monarchies, except for the Papal States, which was the Catholic monarchy. Ha ha. And interestingly enough, the House of Savoy, the Kings of Sardinia, the reason why they took that name was because they had been amongst the last proponents of the Holy Roman Empire. And in fact, the Duke of Savoy had the title Perpetual Vicar of the Empire in Italy. But one Duke of Savoy wanted to be a king. And it so happened that he came in on, I think, the War of the Spanish Succession, and he got Sicily. Well, he traded it with Austria, which had Naples at the time, for Sardinia. He first became King of Sicily, then King of Sardinia. Not King of Savoy or King of Piedmont, because those areas were still under the Holy Roman Empire. That's why the Elector of Brandenburg became King of Prussia, because Prussia lay outside the empire. Anyway, so these were all, typically Catholic monarchies, and in fact, the great counter-revolutionary writer Joseph de Maistre was a servant of the King of Sardinia, as was the great writer Solaro della Margherita. But as we know, in 1831, the main line of the House of Savoy died out and were replaced by junior line, Savoy Carignano, in the person of King Charles Albert, who was a liberal. And he got a liberal minister named Cavour, And between them, they cooked up the idea of unifying the entire peninsula under the House of Savoy. Well, oddly enough, they really didn't, the other Italian princes didn't really care for this idea too much. In 1848, Charles Albert abdicated because of his defeat in the 1848-1849 rebellions against the Austrians, and was replaced with his son, Victor Emmanuel II. Now, interestingly enough, when he became king after his cousin, Charles Felix, died, he did away with the washing of the feet on Maundy Thursday, which was a symbol of real Catholic monarchy, and which the House of Savoy had always done. They wanted to have a modern 19th century monarchy, the way Louis Philippe did in France, the way the supporters of Isabella in Spain did, the way the supporters of Queen Maria in Portugal did. So but they succeeded because the older line died out, and they were it. With Cavour, Victor Emmanuel II was able to conquer in 1859 and 60 most of the peninsula, and with Garibaldi. The only holdouts were Venetia, which the Austrians held on until 1866, and the area around Rome, which they finally took in 1870. At that point, they put in a very centralized state, and as a result, there was guerrilla warfare on the part of a lot of Neapolitans and Sicilians, the so-called Brigantaggio. And the end result of that, of course, was that by 1900, Italy was a liberal monarchy and an anti-clerical monarchy. Although, oddly enough, the son of Victor Emmanuel II, Umberto I, was actually a good Catholic, but he was excommunicated as King of Italy. So the result of that was that during his reign, he couldn't go to public high masses or anything like that, but he had a chaplain offer a low mass for him every morning. And the legal fiction whereby this was done was that as King of Italy, he was excommunicated, but as Umberto di Savoia, he was not. So that meant a lot of things about court ceremonial not having clerical assistance. And for instance, you didn't have a solemn high mass on New Year's Day, which was the case in most royal courts, that kind of thing. Anyway, so he got assassinated in 1900, sadly. They called him Umberto the Good. And he was replaced with his son, the diminutive Victor Emmanuel III. He was the king during World War I, and the king when Mussolini took over in 22. And in 1929, they signed the Lateran Treaty. So that ended the conflict between the Kingdom of Italy, which the Holy See recognized, and the Catholic Church. So from that point on, a lot of Catholics had opposed the Kingdom of Italy because of the way it was imposed and because of its liberalism. But a lot of them, after that, felt that they could become loyal subjects of the king now. And a lot of them had wanted to be, you know. So after World War II, during World War II, King Victor Emmanuel, at some personal risk, signed off on the deposition of Mussolini and switched sides in 1943. After the war was over, he abdicated. His son Umberto II, the May King, as they called him, because he only ruled for a month, did everything he could to try to shore up the monarchy in time for the referendum in that year, 46. But thanks to a fairly well-rigged referendum, the Republic won. Now, the armed forces were very aware of the rigging and also the part that our United States authorities played in it. And they offered to maintain control on his behalf. But he was afraid of a civil war, and he thought that after everything Italy had gone through, the last thing she needed was a civil war. especially one that might put the communists in power. So he withdrew. He didn't abdicate, but he withdrew to the Estoril. And there he died in 80. I was still at Nemi then, so I guess 1979 or 80 he died. Umberto II, a very devout man. He was the one who gave the Shroud of Turin, which belonged to the House of Savoy, to the church. So to answer your question, there are several layers of monarchists in Italy. There are the proponents of the kind of liberal Masonic monarchism that the House of Savoy came to represent. There are, on the other hand, Catholics of the school of people like Attilio Mordini, who favor a truly Catholic monarchy for all of Italy. And then there are the usually very Catholic proponents of the deposed houses. The Two Sicilies, which, as I said during the pre-show, I think, has a succession dispute. The Grand Dukes of Tuscany, the Dukes of Modena and Parma. The Duke of Modena today, incidentally, has married into the Belgian royal family. So he's not only an Archduke of Austria, he's a Prince of Belgium. And then you've got the House of Savoy itself. Kind of a complicated situation because there are traditionalist monarchists in in the old Sardinian lands, both the island and Piemonte, who are in favor of the old Sardinian monarchy, but not necessarily the Kingdom of Italy. In other words, they're the feeling that in taking over the rest of the peninsula, the old Sardinia lost its soul. Plus, to make it even more difficult, there is a succession dispute in the House of Savoy between the son of the last king, Vittorio Emanuele IV, and his cousin, the Duke of Aosta, who, for various reasons, believes that Victor Emmanuel was actually disinherited and that he is the rightful heir. And so even the supporters of the House of Savoy, supporters of monarchy in Italy as a whole, are divided between Unitarians in the different kingdoms, and then the different states. And then the supporters of the House of Savoy are divided first between the supporters of Old Sardinia and the supporters of United Italy, and then between the supporters of Aosta and the supporters of Victor Emmanuel. So to answer your question, all of that taken together with the Two Sicilies succession dispute, it's a mess.
All right.
That being said, there is a lot of really good monarchist stuff being written in Italy today.
Like what? What do you mean? Like history?
History, theory, and so on. And there are a lot of a lot of active monarchist groups that very, very actively mark different anniversaries and so on. Show the flag, make a presence. And interestingly enough, the tombs of Victor Emmanuel II and King Umberto II, not Umberto I, are in the Pantheon in Rome, and they have a volunteer corps of guards of honor that guard them all day, every day. So if you ever go to the Pantheon, you will see Italian monarchists up front and personal.
Okay. Next question is from Anonymous.
Are we sure we want to talk to Anonymous? For someone who's written so much, all these ballads and things.
I know. Well, we'll take a chance.
All right.
Mr. Franchini, I am a new patron, and I have a question for Mr. Coulombe. In Blessed Charles of Austria, Holy Roman Emperor and His Legacy, which I recently finished, you bring up how King Albert of the Belgians also fought on the front lines and was trying to work with Blessed Karl for peace. Was King Albert also very pious? And is there any possible cause for his beatification? Reading his Wikipedia article, King Albert seems like he was a good king, but I cannot find anything about his religious life and thought Mr. Coulombe would know better than anyone else if King Albert was pious and might be beatified. Thank you so much for the show. I really enjoy it.
Well, he was devout. I don't know that he was known for the sort of deep piety that Carl had, but he was devout. There is a web blog that I recommend highly if you're interested in the religion of the Belgian royal family. I highly recommend it. It's called The Cross of Laeken, Laeken, The Cross of Laeken. Laeken being the residence of the Belgian royal family outside Brussels.
Yeah.
And they go into great detail about the religiosity of King Albert, the three kings Leopold, and King Albert's grandson, who is a possibility for beatification, King Baudouin I, who was the king of my youth, and who was very, very devout, as was his wife, very, very pious, and fortunately had no children. But he was the one who the Belgian parliament had to depose for a day to get abortion in, because he wouldn't sign an abortion bill.
Okay. I'm going to say something tangential, because you mentioned the Wikipedia article. I want to encourage more Wikipedia activism.
Ah,
I had a thing. Charles had shared something about Catholicism in Ireland, and there was just a line or two that I felt was completely. I felt it was an egregious anti-Catholic lie, and furthermore, it wasn't even. It didn't even have a citation to it, and I cleaned it up, and I don't know. For me, that was a new thing for me, because it's like, oh, sacred Wikipedia, the source of all knowledge, right? Like, oh, you do that, it's like editing the Encyclopedia Britannica or something,
or the
you know what I mean?
Bible.
Or the Bible. So it's like, oh, I can't touch that. But these people these liberals who have been messing with this so loosely and carelessly, we need to. I feel we need to get more active on Wikipedia. And what's the worst that could happen? Because some of this,
Well, you'll find. I mean, I've noticed, because I'm taking metaphysics here. You'll find that even in very basic philosophical terms, wokery is getting in. So, for instance, this is the Wikipedia article for essentialism. All right, not to be confused with existentialism. All right, essentialism is the view that every entity has a set of attributes that are necessary to its identity and function. In early Western thought, Plato's idealism held that all such things have an essence, an idea, or form. In categories, Aristotle similarly proposed that all objects have a substance that, as George Lakoff put it, make the thing what it is, and without which it would not be that kind of thing. The contrary view, non-essentialism, denies the need to posit such an essence. Essentialism has been controversial from its beginning. Plato in the Parmenides dialogue depicts Socrates questioning the notion, suggesting that if we accept the idea that every beautiful thing or just action partakes of an essence to be beautiful or just, we must also accept the quote-unquote existence of separate essences for hair, mud, and dirt. In biology and other natural sciences, essentialism provided the rationale for taxonomy, at least until the time of Charles Darwin. The role and importance of essentialism in biology is still a matter of debate. All right, you're with me so far. It sounds fairly sane, right?
yeah.
Here's the third paragraph. Essentialism can be particularly pernicious, so we're presuming it's pernicious, when applied to human beings and their identities. In medical sciences, this can lead to a reified view of identities. For example, assuming that differences in hypertension in Afro-American populations are due to racial difference rather than social causes, leading to fallacious conclusions and potentially unequal treatment. in general, believing that social identities such as ethnicity, nationality, or gender are the necessary characteristics of people which define who they are, can lead to dangerous consequences. Essentialist and reductive thinking lies at the core of many hateful and xenophobic ideologies, especially older social theories were guilty of essentialism.
Yeah, there's a little bit too many can do this potentially.
That third, and it's related to nothing except wokery. It's just woke. That third paragraph is crap. Now, it does cite, to be fair, it does have 2 citations. 3. Number 6, Duster Troy, Race and Reification in Science. The second citation is from a lady called J. Fernanda Kurzweil, J. Kurzweil, H. Fernanda, and Emmy Engum, who give us the allure, this is from 2020, the allure of essentialism and extremist ideologies from Anthropology, Southern Africa.
Extremist ideologies?
Essentialism and extremist ideologies. And then J. Kurzweil, N. Rapport, and A.D. Spiegel, also this year, Encountering, Explaining, and Refuting Essentialism, also from Anthropology, Southern Africa. So, that's crap. It has no business. It doesn't explain essentialism. It simply condemns it. And it presumes, I mean, from the very first sentence, the very first sentence, the third sentence, it's the first sentence of the third paragraph. Essentialism can be particularly pernicious, implying it's always pernicious, but it can be particularly pernicious when applied to human beings and their identities.
Yeah, see, this is not objective tone. I mean,
this isn't anything. This is crap. This essentialism philosophy can be particularly pernicious when it's commented upon by ideological morons.
You know, that's just a hop, skip, and a jump away from condemning absolutism.
Yeah, absolute views.
You know, absolute views. You know what I mean?
Absolute values.
Essential, because it seems so they're getting all upset because essentialism is in conflict with transgenderism, right?
Well, they don't say that, but
they don't say that, but we know what's behind this.
Yeah. And if you go to the theory of forms, which is one of the basic things in let me see, have they gotten there yet? Criticisms of Platonic forms, Aristotelian, Scholastic. No, that's still pretty sane. I saw a really good one though on Wikipedia that was like that. I mean, maybe it's under essence. We'll see that. Okay. I tell you.
So
let's see, essence, philosophy.
Well, suffice to say, we need to not go quietly on the Wikipedia front, in my opinion.
No. Well, and Wikipedia is so important because it's, it how do I put it? This is where a lot of people take reality from.
Yeah.
If it's in Wikipedia, they think it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
And the sad truth of the matter is, for the past 80 years, right-thinking, quote-unquote, people have basically abdicated everything to the left in terms of education and culture and art and everything else. And that's wrong. This is precisely where the battle needs to be fought.
Yeah, so there it is. Question.
So if y'all know stuff, all you undesirables out there, all you deplorables, you come on down from the hills and every place else that the people who know stuff or think they do
Yeah.
and comment on Wikipedia, y'all come down and put in your 2 cents worth. Because you know what? You're really a lot smarter than they are.
Yeah. I fixed your article too. Your article had errors from 2009, like multiple errors that weren't even accurate anymore.
What's wrong with? So basically, they weren't accurate to begin with, and they became less so later.
It said your article's too reliant on primary sources, which just wasn't true anymore. And I thought I had left it for a long time because I thought like there are Wikipedia people, like employees or whatever that do quality assurance or what have you.
There's no such thing. It's all volunteer.
No, I mean, but volunteers with responsibility. Well, what are their costs? They've got some people, I'm sure, that they're monitoring the health of and the state of their articles. Otherwise, it could be completely hijacked.
Well, I suppose so. I guess the Wikipedia tower is a whole different setup.
Yeah, there has to be some internal control there. It's not just pure free form like that.
What a pity. All right.
Yeah.
What else we got?
Okay, a question from Robert.
Okay, Robert.
What is Charles's opinion on jury trials? What is their place in a monarchical society, and what was their place in monarchies past? Is their proper function only to determine the facts of the case, while a state-appointed or monarch-appointed judge determines the justice? Wasn't the jury a democratic feature of ancient Athens and ancient Rome and the Germanic thing?
Well, to answer your question, the jury trial as we know it in our system is the product of the monarchy. Just like sheriffs and coroners, notaries public, bailiffs, they all came to us from the monarchy. So their place would be what it always was. The other systems of law under other monarchies had other procedures. But with us, the jurors serving on a jury, like voting, presuppose you're a person of education and substance. The grand juries, which incidentally we still have, the British no longer have grand juries. They got rid of them, I think, in the 20s or 30s. But we still do. And the grand jury is, you still primarily have people serving on the grand jury who usually they're retired, they're people of some background because they have the time to do it. Grand jury duty is quite different from a petty jury, as they say. But yeah, it would operate pretty much the way it does now. The idea being that the king's judge or the king himself basically works justice after the jury find the defendant guilty or not.
I find the jury system pretty good, to be honest.
Yeah, I do too.
I think, that's these sort of more democratic functions work well when they're on a low level. There's a hole in our street. It's going to cost this much money from the city to fix this hole in the street. Is it worth it? Yes or no? Yeah, of course.
Well, it may not be worth it to the city, but it could very well be worth it to the neighborhood association.
Yeah. So things like that. But when it comes to such exalted questions that involve economics is so deep and it's so complicated. And to expect the masses to come up with a good answer to that, it's like a bunch of pre-algebra students who get a test on calculus, and so they collectively are working out the calculus, questions, and they've got multiple choices, and they have to pick which one, is correct. but no one knows calculus. And plot twist, they're too dumb in calculus to know that all of the multiple choice options are also wrong.
But you see, we can make it more like real life by decreeing that whatever they choose is correct, even though it isn't.
And there it is. And that's the other thing too. Yeah, that's exactly right. All the multiple choice options are wrong, but then whatever they choose ends up, yes, A+. Correct. You did a good job.
That's the way it was at my school.
And that's the problem that we're at right now. We've got...
Well, never underestimate the power of stupid.
You know, all these people in California, you've got, what is this, Ro Khanna, this congressman, trying to get the minimum wage up to $20 an hour. Well,
why not?
I mean, there's so many things wrong with that. He's saying, well, nobody can live on under $20 an hour. Well, your assumption
Nobody
is ridiculous. What about
$20.
people? What about people who are going to college and not, just trying to get a couple dollars?
The problem he's got, and this is a very big one, is that, well, just taking California as an example, I think that a big part of California's problems came back in the late 50s, early 60s, whatever it was, when California's legislature became professional and full-time.
Yeah.
Now, what does that mean? It means that before, they were only in session a few months out of the year, and they didn't have a salary.
Yeah.
They were not professional legislators. Now, what is wrong with that? With there being professional legislatures? Well, several things. Firstly, they're constantly there, so they have to constantly come up with ideas to justify their existence. They and their staffs suck up a lot of money.
Yeah.
Now, the argument in favor of it is that it was more democratic. That is to say, the only people who would serve in the legislature before were people who could afford to take 3 months off and go to Sacramento.
Yeah.
And hang out. But you have to ask yourself, which produced the better product? Under which did the state as a whole prosper?
Yeah.
Since these guys took over, it's really been a steady, but slow drop downhill. And one of the things that really has put the nail in our coffin is the open primary. That was just crazy. Why are you going to have political parties if you're going to have an open primary? And California being what it is, the two top-rated people will always be Democrats. So you don't really have elections in California. That's what an open primary means. And I said it at the time. A lot of people said it. But, this is great. It'll break the dominance of the parties on the process. No, it won't. It will ensure the dominance of one of the parties. And that one party in complete control has been running the state right down the tubes. The most egregious thing that they're doing, and it's a result of a number of different things, is they're driving our tax base out of the country, out of the state. You're looking at a state with some, you always hear people going on about 2% own the property and so on. Yeah, well, maybe 25% pay the taxes. Now stop and think about that. If 25% pay the bulk of the taxes, what does that mean? It means that most of us in California are getting a free ride. Now, if the legislature passed bills that convince that 25% that it's no longer worth their while to stay in California, guess what's going to happen?
Yeah. Everyone's going to move out.
Well, not everybody. The 25% will. And who's going to be left paying the bills? Except they don't have any money.
Yeah. Yep. I do like on small cities. I think I think things are a lot better. The mayor of Alhambra is my dentist, and
No.
he said to me, he said, whenever I go I have to take off of work to go to a city council meeting, it's a pay cut. That's it, But he's a man of principle.
Yeah.
He's a good man, and
Well, see, I'm all for that, but that requires when you have a setup like that, that does require that the majority of the populace take an active interest. Because if you don't have that, you'll get what we've had in places like Bell.
yeah,
Remember that?
we know.
Maywood.
Yeah, it's a mess. Corruption, ruled by
And,
one
and
family.
well, that's my favorite town in all of California.
I know. Okay, we're on a time limit, Charles. We've got a
All
lot of
right,
questions.
fine. I don't care. Be
All
that way.
right. Question from Nicholas.
All right, let's get it.
Hello, gentlemen. I was discussing the matter of human equality with a classmate, and I asked how could we all be unique individuals while also being equal humans. I personally don't believe in the idea of human equality, and I believe I've always had a disbelief lingering in the back of my mind, even at a younger age. I never would have ever said I am equal to my father at a younger age, and still would make that claim. Of course, no one really agreed with my opinion. Not an issue. An opinion I am actually interested in is Charles's. With the permission of Mr. Vincent, the book rights activist, Franchini, I was hoping Charles could tell me if I am on the right or wrong path on the matter of human equality with this idea, and what the historical position of the Catholic Church has been.
Well, firstly, there's equality and there's equality. Now, the church has always believed in equality before the law and equality in the eyes of God. But by the same token, the church has also believed in just deserts. That is to say, people deserve different things for doing different things. The better you do, the better you should get. The worse you do, not so much. St. Pius X told us that social distinctions were a blessing from God. And that's, kind of a shocking thing to our little tiny sensibilities today. The idea that social inequality is a blessing. But it is. It's a tremendous blessing. Why? Well, because the poor exist for the rich to be able to act out of charity and magnanimity. And the rich exist to allow the poor something of an income. But in both cases, it's important for their humility to be beholden to someone. The poor help the rich save their souls. The rich help the poor save their bodies. But each deserves something, a respect due their position. J.R.R. Tolkien put it very well when he said that, pulling your cap off to the Lord of the Manor might not do him any good, but it's damn good for you. There is no holiness without humility, and if you don't have if you don't have social stratification, which you're always going to have no matter what you do, to be honest. The reason why it's a blessing, as I say, is that taken in the right spirit, it can facilitate your salvation, whichever side you find yourself in. Also, it is a spur for those on the bottom to try to do better and accomplish something. You want to better yourself, or you want your children to be better off than you were. In monarchies where there were, where they had nobility, it was very standard that the most able commoners would get ennobled precisely for the purpose of bringing them into the upper echelon and thus improving it.
You know what I think of when I hear the word equality? It's because I read the book forgot what it's called. It's like 46 Laws of Power or something. I think it's a famous
Mm.
book.
Ah,
But it, one of the cases of there, it notes that e- equality is a power play. Like desiring equality. Equality is the power play by those not in power to get power.
yeah.
And so I thought that was interesting.
Although today it can also be used by those in power to stay in power by using those on the bottom. We'll make you equal if you do as we tell you.
That too. You know,
And the
there's so many games played with this word.
Oh yeah, well I mean von Kuehnert-Leddihn had that wonderful book Liberty or Equality, and he makes the important point that you can't really have both
Hmm.
because equality of human beings being what and who they are, equality in that sense has to be imposed.
Yeah.
But any regime that is capable of imposing it is there's no liberty. But if people are free to develop themselves and their abilities, there will inevitably be natural inequalities because people have different levels of ability and they have ability in different things.
Yeah.
So, for instance, I'm a published author. I've lived a very enjoyable life. I've gone all over the world. I've done this, I've done that, right?
Yeah.
I don't think I have ever in my life made as much money as a well paid plumber. Now,
Hmm.
you look at that and you say, well, yeah, but you've gone all over the world, you've met all sorts of people, whereas the plumber is stuck doing plumbing. Okay, but he gets paid a lot better for it than I do for writing. And that's just the way it is. I don't resent it because you're right. There are pleasures to my state of life that I enjoy, and I'm willing, for the sake of them, to give up what I don't get, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. I think
But
but so the founding fathers used the term equality to mean equal under the law,
yeah,
right? Like as an ideal to pursue. And that's a good ideal to pursue, right?
well, it is in fact equal treatment under the law is something that uh, was aspired for in Catholic Europe.
Yeah.
Uh, that's called justice. Now, mind you, sometimes though justice might appear differently than it would to us. So, for instance, um, during in England under the old trial system and up until 1967, a nobleman, a peer of the realm, could only be tried by other noblemen as the jury
Hmm.
in capital cases. Why is that? Well, because you have a right to be tried by a jury of your peers. That means you're equals. Imagine if in our system you could only be tried by people with a level of education likened to your own. Would that be equal or not? Because if you were stupid and everybody else on the jury was as stupid as you are, that might not be much fun.
Yeah. All right. 3 questions from Joshua.
3.
Charles, I've heard you mention how in the pre-modern political arrangement, authority was concentrated while power was diffused, and how this dynamic has completely flipped around in our times. Could you
True.
expand on this a bit, and will you please do so?
Sure. To both. Well, I mean, basically, the in those days, authority, the right to say what ought to be done, was concentrated in the church, who derived it from God, and who bestowed it on the king via the coronation. And that gave the king the right to be the supreme judge. And that meant that if he didn't judge cases himself, he deputed judges to do justice in his name. Uh, Secondly, it gave him the right to determine the course of foreign policy to the degree that governments of those days had any control over it at all, economic policy, where roads needed to be built, royal roads, defenses of the realm, all that kind of stuff. Foreign policy and defense in particular were the business of government, of the king's government. And then thirdly, of presiding over the gathering of the estates of the realm when he needed more money. You see, for the normal running of affairs, generally the king paid for it out of his own estates, his own properties. But if there was an invasion or there was going to be a war, or there was something that required an extra outlay of money, the king would have to impose taxes. But that meant calling the estates because they were the ones who were going to have to pay them. And then that meant selling the estates on the idea of paying extra tax. In other words, he'd have to show them, or his mouthpiece would have to show them, that in fact this measure was necessary, and the taxes to raise it, the taxes to pay for it were necessary for the good of the entire body politic. And that was pretty much the king's job, and also to mediate between the different factions in the country. Below that, you had different rungs of power. And the king would probably have a representative in the province whose specific job was to mediate between the different powers in the province. The lowest rungs, your towns and so forth, functioned as almost entirely independent, except that they would derive their charters from the king, and the mayor or chief officer, whatever they called him, of the town might or might not be chosen by the king. But beyond that, the provincial estates and the town guilds or whatever they had pretty much ran their own show, subject to complaints of abuses, which might very well end up in front of the king to adjudicate.
All right. Did the medieval political arrangement serve as a more successful model and example of subsidiarity than our modern attempts at federalism and the separation of powers? And if so, why?
Well, I would say by and large they did. And the reason for that is that they had grown up naturally over a long period under the influence of the Catholic faith on the local tribe or barbarian tribe or remnant of Rome that happened to be there. And these procedures and protocols grew up gradually and organically under the church's tutelage. Now, mind you, it was far from perfect. There's not a human government that is. But within the fairly narrow scope that you asked me about, i.e. subsidiarity, yeah, it was certainly better. Our system and most of those that are around today were invented rather than organic. And they were often invented by men who were the opposite of Catholic.
We've kind of touched on this in a previous episode. I feel like technology has a huge role to play in these models, because
Sure.
With low technology, of course, subsidiarity is going to play a bigger role, because you don't have some singular control panel.
No.
Whereas now, absolutely, you do.
Well, now, it might require, the question, for instance, who should have control of the internet, or rather, who should adjudicate the internet? That's something I could easily see being the job of the king. Or, in those days, there was the supra, not super, that would be different, but the supra national organization of Christendom, the Holy Empire. And it could be that this would be one of the things that would devolve to the emperor himself, simply because, how do I put it? Simply because the worldwide range of that kind of thing is perhaps too great for a single country, a single government to handle. I mean, you know, people got very upset when Benedict XVI, in one of his encyclicals, talked about the need for a supranational authority like the UN. And they were very upset, and they jumped up and down. But the problem is that he was dealing with what is a reality, which is that there are forces and powers in this world that are
What are you looking up, Charles?
I'm looking up a line. I got it. Looking up a line from that hideous strength, which I have now. Which I'm going to use in a second. We have to put up with the fact that these things are real. Who controls the multinational corporations? Who controls international terrorism and fights it? Well, the UN occupies to a great degree that role, but it has a lot of defects, not least of which are its first principles. And, people get all excited about one world government and all that. What they have to understand is that in the Middle Ages and before, the notion of the empire, the Holy Empire, beyond and above all the Christian kingdoms, was a real one. Now, for the same reason that national governments didn't really have much existence, the empire, in that sense, had even less. But think of this, and this is a good quote from C.S. Lewis's That Hideous Strength. But it's important because it's a good insight into the medieval mind. The character of Merlin says the character of Ransom. Merlin's been resurrected. Ransom has explained to him how that hideous strength has covered everything. And Merlin suggests different allies or possibilities to fight it. And Ransom, one by one, knocks them down. So finally, Merlin says that we must go to him whose office is to put down tyrants and restore life to dying kingdoms. We must call on the emperor. Then Ransom replies, there is no emperor. No emperor, began Merlin, and then his voice died away. He sat still for some minutes, wrestling with a world which he had never envisaged. Oh, there is no emperor. But I can tell you that consciously or otherwise, the reason why the post-war popes, post-World War II popes, in the face of growing globalization, have been supporters of the UN and the EU, despite their obvious flaws, is, I think, in some sense, an unconscious or conscious hankering over the idea of the Holy Empire. And if globalization continues, if in fact our civilization does not break down, in which case this will be a moot point and subsidiarity will reemerge of its own without having to be worried about. Mind you, we'll all be enjoying the same lifestyle our ancestors did. But if that does not happen, and we're going to have a worldwide civilization that's decent to live under, we will need something approximating the Holy Empire. Because who controls the internet? And who fights international terrorism? And I guarantee you, such a state will not be utopian. Because no state will ever be utopian. It will have its problems and its difficulties. The question is not will it be perfect, but will it be better? And that's all you can ever ask out of any human government. Not that it be perfect, but that it be better.
All right, final question today.
All
In
right.
terms of authority and power, what would some of the specific differences be between monarchs, both medieval and early modern, and modern heads of state, especially the American presidency?
Well, interestingly enough, there's not as much difference between monarchs of that era and the current president, the American president, as you might think. I mean, the American president has a lot more power than they did. But in terms of modern constitutional monarchs and the presidents in what are called parliamentary republics. There's a world of difference. You see, in a constitutional monarchy like the Commonwealth and Britain, Spain, Belgium, the Netherlands, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and so forth, Japan, and in parliamentary republics like Italy, Poland, Lithuania, Austria, Portugal. In those countries like that, the head of state is a figurehead. Now, if he's a monarch, he does have a certain amount of soft power that comes from his being united with national traditions and being a living flag and all that kind of thing. If he's the president of a country like Austria or Germany or Italy or wherever, he's basically a retired politician who usually has been elected not by the people, but by parliament. And so in Austria, for instance, everybody knows the name of the Archduke Karl, who would be the heir to the throne. But a lot of Austrians don't know the name of the president of Austria. And the same is true in Italy and Portugal. So, in a sense, the president of a parliamentary republic is the most powerless of all heads of state. But in any case, in such a setup, the chancellor or the prime minister is called the head of government. He's the effective ruler. And as long as he's got a majority in parliament, he can do whatever he wants, which is more than a medieval monarch could have done. The same is true of a presidential republic like the United States, France, Latin America. But there, the head of state is the head of government. So it's more analogous to a medieval monarch than modern monarchs are. Which is it's a little convoluted to understand. Now, turning it around, however, I've long held that if there are no in the West, there are no executive monarchs the way there are executive presidents. There are none. Well, no, I take that back. The Prince of Liechtenstein, the only one. Outside of him, such people don't exist. But I have every belief that if you had a ruler who was hereditary with a written constitution that gave him specifically the powers given the President of the United States, and no more, popular opinion probably would not allow him to do any more than it states precisely in the Constitution, which is not the case with the American, French, or Latin American presidents, precisely because people can vote for them. So they're willing to let them skate, thinking that they've got some kind of control because they can vote. But of course, that particular superstition is beginning to die in a big way, even in the United States.
Yeah.
And not for good reasons. You know, this is one of the ironies, and I mentioned this on Facebook, but I do want to mention it. And that is that, you know, most of my life, monarchism for Americans has been a fringe of the fringe of the fringe. So tiny a minority that there's no point even discussing it. In my time, and especially in the past 10 years, I have seen it become less marginal. But I'm all too aware that that's because our systems, our structure has decayed so much. And it's an ironic position for me to be in because, you know, I miss the country I was born and raised in. I miss the fact that my views seem so insane because the system works so well. Does that sound strange?
No, it doesn't.
And yet, you know, I can't, by the same token, I know that in recent months, a lot of Catholic young people who have begun to explore what our tradition has, not just religiously, but also in terms of our political past. Getting a lot of guff from people my age and older for LARPing, you're not being realistic, blah, blah, blah. Well, the problem with that attitude, number one, nothing is going to get better if young people don't explore things and dream dreams. We're living right now in the nightmare that the older half of my generation dreamed. They got what they wanted, and it's horrible, but they got it. I think that the young people should be able to dream and hope and search for something better. And to add to it the poignancy for me, when I was in my 20s, bad as things were in the church, Pope John Paul II came to the throne, and he didn't make everything wonderful by a long shot, but he did start the process that ended with Summorum Pontificum, and he restored Eucharistic devotion. People forget that there was no or very little adoration or benediction in the last years of Paul VI. I don't think I saw benediction once from 1968 to 1980. People forget that. And then politically, Ronald Reagan came to the throne. And in both cases, John Paul II and Reagan, for those of us of somewhat like opinion, it was the feeling that we once again had adult leadership and that the craziness of the 60s was at last being put behind us. And then a few years later, to crown the thing, the Soviet Union and its satellites fell. It's hard to express what a joy that was. And even with all the terrible stuff that's happened since, that joy, it's difficult to erase for me. It's still great. And of course, living here in Austria now and knowing all sorts of Eastern Europeans whom I couldn't possibly know, and many of whom who would never have been born had the wall not fallen. I mean, it's still great. So the point I'm making is that when I was young, we had dreams to dream, and they seemed to be coming true. Now, 40 years later, I look at the kids my age of, again, a similar ideological bent, and it's just miserable for them, and they have nothing good to look forward to. And what they get from people my age, even those who are more or less supposedly on their side, is, you're LARPing or you're rigid. That's just the wrong tack to take. I understand why my contemporaries feel that way. They feel that this is all daydreaming and so on and so forth, and we've got to get back to the business at hand, which is restoring the situation of our youth. Well, except for the fact that we ourselves lived through it, that's as much of a pipe dream as bringing in a monarchy. In fact, as things stand at the moment, anything different from what we've got, the regime of masks and curfews, is LARPing. I'll take you a step further. Our lords and masters with this great reset, they're dreaming, they're LARPing. God alone knows what reality is actually going to give us all, masters and subjects. Because, the funny thing is, patriarch conspiracy theorists and patriarch masters themselves, we're actually a lot more tightly tied together than people understand. Our masters certainly don't understand it. That's the problem. With them poisoning the well, as it were, they're not doing themselves any good. Not at all. And a lot of very well-intended people who have access to them in hopes of getting something better out of the wreck go along with their deal. I won't say who I'm thinking of, but suffice to say, when I look at the names that are going to be at Davos to discuss the Great Reset, I know who I mean. And I know they're very decent people who believe that the only way to save anything is to deal with those who actually have power. Well, that's a risky strategy, and I don't bet much on it working. But who can tell? In the immortal words of J.R.R. Tolkien, not even the wise can see all ends. And I would preface that or amend that remark by saying I certainly am not one of the wise. So we'll see what happens.
Okay. We're out of time today.
No, there's something I've got to say.
Okay.
This is a direct quote. And it's a direct quote from my landlord, Criswell. Yes. I think it's time because, we've been talking about what's coming up, what may happen from Davos and all that kind of thing. Well, this is a message of inspiration from the great and amazing Criswell. Speaking to you from beyond the grave. Ah, greetings, my friend. We are all interested in the future, for that is where you and I are going to spend the rest of our lives, whether we want to or not. And remember, my friend, these future events will affect you in the future. The future is in your hands. So let us remember the past, honor the present, and be amused at the future.
All right.
That was a message from Criswell, from Criswell, from beyond the grave, for the people of the 21st century, which he foresaw would not occur.
Okay.
No, he predicted the world would end August 18th, 1999.
What went wrong there?
What do you mean what went wrong? What are you asking?
I mean, for his prediction to not work.
Who said it didn't work?
So you're saying that the world did end on that day?
Yeah. This is the Criswellian aftermath. Oh, come on, like there'd really be gay marriage pushed by the Supreme Court of the United States. and let me get this straight. And there'd be like concertina wire around the Capitol and troops to protect the congressmen from their subjects. Peddle that somewhere else, buddy. Nobody's going to believe that kind of tripe. No. The world ended August 18th, 1999.
Okay.
See, that wasn't so difficult, was it?
No, it's actually more difficult resisting and trying. It's just so easy to just let the madness just calmly wade over you and just overcome you and envelop you.
What
madness? Let go.
What madness are you talking about?
The all-encompassing madness of the world and you and just okay,
but
Charles.
You see how much more convenient it is to say that the world ended August 18th, 1999 than to admit that everything that's happened since then happened?
I don't know.
See, I'm here to help. That's what no one ever seems to understand.
Okay, then let go of the whip.
Let go of the whip?
Stop flogging me with this madness.
What do you want to be flogged with?
Bunnies and jelly beans and goodness.
How about guinea pigs and buttons?
No.
No?
Well, buttons, yeah. I mean, I am a button collector.
That's true. All right. All the buttons you want. But let me ask you one question, though.
Yeah.
And I think this is kind of a useful one. Tomorrow, what will you be doing other than collecting buttons? What's going on tomorrow on Monday?
On Monday, it's off the menu.
Huh. And in between collecting buttons, the soul you save?
It just may be your own.
God bless you all, ladies and gentlemen. And to all you Welshmen out there, and you know who you are, happy St. David's Day. Men of Harlem.